Good afternoon. I wanted to thank John Britton, Professor John Britton, for recommending my paper. I'm not really sure what he had been drinking at the time, but he did give me some advice when I went to him to ask him and actually sort of beg him to get me out of it. And if he had any tips for me, and he said, basically, Amanda, you're a great speaker, but sometimes you don't know when to stop. I'm going to work on that today. So interesting is I don't know if you guys were around last week for the election. Sort of an insular thing. We had these two people who were trying to run the country, and a bunch of other people who are trying to run the country with them. So a lot of things that were, I guess, maybe people might consider lesser issues, sort of kind of went under the radar for a lot of people. But the fact is that there were actually three super important ballot initiatives for the LGBT community, specifically in Maryland, Maine, and Washington, where voters sort of took up the call and voted to allow same-sex marriages and to also to recognize, in other areas, to recognize marriages and unions that had occurred in other states, which is a big deal, and it's really awesome. But the fact is that, clicker to the right.
There you go.
Good, all right. So here we have these two, I couldn't find a picture for referendum 74 of Washington State, but it's out there if you're from Washington. Don't be offended, I didn't leave you out on purpose. Just get better coverage. Correct? Excellent. Oh, too far to the right. There seems to be a slide missing, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, the point is, sorry, don't know when to stop. This is all great for same-sex marriage. It's kind of the civil rights issue of our time at this point. The Supreme Court is poised to take it up in, I don't know, in this term, hopefully. And it's all, like I said, it's all very good. There's a lot of forward motion, but for people like my friends, Lisa and Aura, who have two children, who are they're legally married in DC, and it's all very good for them. They have two children, and they still had to go through a lot of legal hoops to make sure that those children couldn't be taken away from them in the event of a split, or God forbid, in the event of one of their deaths. So I was really inspired to write this paper because of so many people that I know who are trying to have the American dream, whatever that looks like for anybody, but for which it seems for marriage that it seems like it would follow that parentage and marriage go together, and for a long time they did, which I'll discuss. Right. Essentially, sort of from time immemorial in the U.S., to be legitimate as a child, basically your mom had to be married at the time you were born. It didn't matter who she was married to at that point. If it was a husband who was willing to hold you out as his child, or at least not openly denounce you, magically legitimate, regardless of your actual parentage. But the problem was that when you got to be 18, all those benefits that you had, like, I don't know, marriage, inheritance, social benefits, things like that, were no longer available to you because you're illegitimate, which only showed up when you're 18. It's very strange. But the U.S. Supreme Court kind of said that's not really right. That's it's not the children's fault that their parents weren't married when they were born. So we need to bring everybody onto an equal footing. Especially because the traditional model, sort of was giving way in a lot of ways. Particularly in Levy v. Louisiana, just as an example, and this is where this discrimination is invidious quote comes from. It was a case involving parents who were trying to recover for the wrongful death of their illegitimate children, but they were barred from doing so in Louisiana, and so the Supreme Court said that a parent who loses a child is a parent who loses a child, regardless of the parent's marital status or anything like that, and it violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. So, moving past that to this case, Stanley v. Illinois. The petitioner in this case in the Supreme Court was an unwed father who's, I guess, in today's terms, she'd be considered a common law wife. Mother of 3 children. She died, and the state, at the time, Illinois had a law that said that unwed fathers weren't automatically entitled to custody of their children, and that those children, at the mother's death, just became wards of the state, because that's in everybody's best interest, right? So the Supreme Court kind of said that, that's very silly, paraphrasing. That's the gist of it. But basically, that they couldn't, that civil society had progressed to the point where you couldn't pretend that kind of discrimination, allowing children whose father they knew their father, they had a relationship with him, they were close with him, that those children should sort of, become wards of the state like they were a house or something that was as cheating to the state. So in Stanley v. Illinois, they said, yes, in terms of societal mores, extramarital sex, bad. We want to punish people who do that. Unmarried children, unmarried children, that's great. Unmarried mothers and their children, bad. We want to punish people who have sex outside of marriage, and gosh, if they have children, that's just terrible. Let's just punish those children too. The Supreme Court is like, it needs to stop because it's not even feasible. It's not feasible. It's not defensible. It's not good for the country or the children, let alone the country. And then beginning with the sexual revolution in 1960s, sort of the make love, not war generation.
It was like 1968, as I recall.
Thank you. I couldn't get an exact date, so I'm not sure.
I'll check my diary.
The idea that that sex outside of marriage was bad, it's certainly alive and well today, but it was certainly sort of destigmatized, as were the children, as resulted as a product of those adventures. Which is great because it sort of transitioned from the idea of legitimate in and of itself. It's the word legitimate means sort of right, and illegitimate means you're not right. So you wake up one morning and you're all of a sudden you're illegitimate, and society has all these stigmas attached to you. It's the Supreme Court said this is not, can't do this anymore, and society has changed sufficiently so that we can just put that by the wayside.